Hello again, YouTube. In this video, I'm going to be exploring the world of the occult. Now, why are we going to be exploring the world of the occult? Well, very recently, images of the Economist magazine's front cover came into public view. These incorporate symbols and imagos from tarot and also from various occult traditions. So it's a salient question to ask why a magazine that is ostensibly about economics, why would they do that? Why would they incorporate these elements of occult traditions in that front cover? To answer that question and to understand the meaning behind it, I'm going to have to explain to you and demystify various aspects of occult philosophy. You might call it a de-occulting process in some ways. Now, the Economist magazine is owned by the Economist group. 50% of the shares in the Economist group are owned by the English branch of the Rothschild dynasty, the Rothschild family, and also the Agnelli family through its holding company Exor. These are major players on the world stage, of course, right? They're very prominent families of Europe. And they're also very wealthy. Now, the economist Thorstein Veblen, in his book Conspicuous Consumption, noted that the wealthy man is a great believer in luck, spells, divination, destiny, omens, and shamanistic ceremony. And so they are, even as he noted in his time, which was over 100 years ago, he noted that the upper hierarchies that govern society, whether in the realm of economics or whether in the realm of other strata and other spheres, they are superstitious to some degree by nature. And also they have, because of this natural interest, they have studied occult phenomenon as well as occult philosophies. So they are very, very intricately familiar with the meanings and the employment of symbols and so on and so forth. Right? Now, this is not conspiratorial, what I'm saying. This is factually provable as being the case. And I don't generally tend to use that word loosely, right? But if you look at the Economist's cover, you will understand this. Now, according to Chisholm's Encyclopedia Britannica, published in 1911, this volume I actually own, as well as many of the other works I'm going to be referring to. Antoine Court de Gibelin in 1781 initiated the interpretation of the tarot as an arcane repository of timeless knowledge and esoteric wisdom. MacGregor Mathers of the Golden Dawn later taught of the links between the tarot and the Kabbalah in 1886. Now, why is this relevant? Because the tarot and the Kabbalah are inextricably linked, right? They have been since the dawn of the emergence of tarot cards, okay? And we're going to get into why that is and how that is. But before we do that, it is necessary to understand Kabbalist philosophy, okay? Now, according to the Tree of Life, as per the Kabbalistic traditions, there are various parts of human experience that can be described in a diagram, in this diagram, which they have dubbed the Tree of Life, right? And the way this works is that at the very top of the tree, this is called Kether. Okay, the circles within this tree, within this diagram, are called Sephirot. Okay, And in the first Sephirot, you have Kether, which is the crown, which symbolizes unity consciousness, okay? Which is the ultimate aim of any individual who has studied the occult or has studied philosophy or the Hermetic traditions and so on and so forth, right? So it's a unified, singular approach to yourself and to life, the microcosmic and the macrocosmic perception, if you will. And at the bottom of this tree, in Sephirot number 10, is Malkuth, which represents kingdom, the physical world, the earth, right? So, according to this tradition, within this tree of life, you have the physical world, the mental plane, the emotional plane, and the archetypical plane. We will get into all of these. Now, starting again at Malkuth, because the progression on the tree of life is from the bottom upwards, right? So we start off being born into this world, this kingdom, right? The physical world, the earth, yes? And as we progress, we go up to, progression in our thinking that is, we go up to Sephirot number 9, which is Yesod. And Yesod represents the foundation of the self, okay? And the foundation of the world, if interpreted in a macrocosmic sense. From Yesod, which is the mental plane, so this is where one begins to engage in thinking when you first emerge into the world, right? You then proceed to the Sephirot Hod, which is the Sephirot number 8, which represents splendor and beauty. From Hod, from splendor, from glory and beauty, you then progress, once you've adopted an appreciation for these, you progress to Netzach, which represents endurance, leadership, and victory. It's sort of the inner strength of an individual, if you will, okay? Which you again develop as you progress in life. From that, one progresses to Sephirot number 6, which is Tifereth, which represents reality, okay? And this is where we begin to process the nature of our own reality that we are occupying, okay? This is, you might call it the Sephirot of objective truth, okay? This would incorporate things like the scientific method and so forth. From Tifereth, one progresses to Geborah, or Gevurah, depending on how you pronounce it, which is Sephirot number 5. This represents strength and courage, okay? From this, one traverses through the stages of life to Hesod, which is Sephirot number 4, which represents kindness, love, and mercy. I spoke about the importance of many of these things in my previous video, which explored psychoanalytic theory, okay? We will sort of touch on that again through this presentation, if you will. So from Hesod, one then goes through what is interpreted as Da'ath, which is the knowledge of the unseen, okay? Now, this is where we start to question the nature of those things which we cannot observe directly. Forms and thoughts, essentially, okay? And through that progression, we then come to Sephirot number 3, which is Binah, okay? And Binah represents understanding, okay? So we incorporate our total knowledge of all the things we've learned through our life, and when we reach the Sephirot of understanding, we then begin to process that information and understand it by definition. Then we progress to Sephirot number 2, which is Chokmah, which is interpreted as wisdom. Okay? Now there's a great deal of difference between understanding something and having wisdom about that something. What is the difference? Well, with understanding, you're just processing it mentally, okay? You might even say you're processing it on an emotional level, as well as perhaps even, if one dare use the term, spiritual, right? The understanding part is incorporating information. Wisdom is the application of information. So, for example, if you know how to make a pot of tea, okay, that's understanding. Knowing the methodology is understanding. The wisdom is in doing it, right? So you go and you make the tea. Then you progress from Chokmah, which is wisdom, which is when you start to implement your understanding, to Keter, which is the crown, which is unity consciousness, right? So once you've implemented the understanding of any area of your expertise, you then begin to be able to unify your thinking, solidify your thinking around that. Okay, you begin to develop a mental picture, right? And you focus your attentions towards that. So these are the basics of the tree of life. Above the tree of life, you have what was known in Kabbalistic tradition as Ein Sof Or, which is boundless light. Okay, the belief was that everything that is in material existence stemmed from light. This is very also heavily incorporated into biblical tradition as well. We know how necessary photons are, for example, in the modern scientific realm to reality and its existence, as well as other electromagnetic phenomena. Ein Sof is seen as the boundless, beyond the boundless light, right? So this is a step further beyond that which we can understand fully. And then Ein represents nothing or nothingness. Now this is very interesting just on a philosophical level, because if all things stemmed from nothing, i.e. if something came from nothing, then that nothing, the nothingness, is the origin of all things. Okay? And physics, of course, takes that worldview, right? Modern day physics has come to this conclusion that all things have come from nothing, right? But it's important to understand the definition of nothing and the relationships between something and nothing existing. Now, these are very, very complex, so I won't get to cover this fully here. But the very fact that there is nothing demands that there be something. Okay? There's a mathematical relationship between the two. The nothingness demands that something exists. Now, Lawrence Krauss, the physicist, has explored this concept. So I would encourage you to look into his work if you're of a scientific or physicist bent, really. Okay? But it is interesting that the Kabbalists had incorporated these ideas quite a length of time ago. And so, regardless of how one views existence and how it came into being and what it is, what we can see at the very least is that the Kabbalistic tree of life guides us towards what later became interpreted through alchemy, the alchemical traditions, as the philosopher's stone. Now, I'm merely going to be touching on some of these subjects rather than explaining them in depth here. And the reason for this is because they are too extensive to cover. Okay, I wouldn't be doing them justice if I went into them here in this video, right? But the alchemical process was noted by Carl Jung, the psychologist, as representing a psychological journey. And he did some great work in his book Psychology and Alchemy with regards to this. Now, getting back onto the Tree of Life, the Tree of Life also has incorporated with it tarot cards. Okay, as we explained earlier, MacGregor Mathis linked the tarot to the Kabbalah from ancient tradition since its inception. And Antoine Comte de Gibelin also came to a similar conclusion. Now, let's get into the incorporated tarot within the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. So Malkuth, which is where we begin our journey as we journey forward in this philosophical journey of ours, in this psychological journey of ours, is represented, so Sephiroth 10, Malkuth, kingdom, is represented in the tarot on a microcosmic scale, i.e. relating to the individual, by the Wheel of Fortune. On a macrocosmic level, it's represented by the tarot card Judgment. Okay? So on a world scale, on a global scale, the card Judgment represents Malkuth. Okay? The physical world, the earth. Right? And as we progress to Yesod, Sephiroth number 9, Foundation, this is represented again in the tarot by the Sun card on the macroscopic level, or the Hermit card in the microscopic individualist view. From that, when we progress to Hod, Sephiroth number 8, Glory, Beauty, and Splendor, this is represented by the Hermit card in the microcosmic sense and the Moon card in the macrocosmic sense. From there, obviously one goes to Netzach, which is Sephiroth number 7, Endurance, Leadership and Victory, which is represented by the Chariot card in the microcosmic and the Star card in the macrocosmic. Okay? We then progress to Tifereth, which symbolizes reality, Sephiroth number 6. Okay? And reality is shown through the tarot as represented by the Lover's card in the microcosmic sense, symbolizing the necessity of the heart and love in general in one's approach individually in life. But on the macrocosmic level, it is represented by the Tower card. Okay? And you'll begin to see the significance of these things. I know this must be boring you to tears, right? But there is a significance to this with regards to the Economist's cover. Okay? But you can only understand that if you go through this process of total understanding, unfortunately. And again, it can be a little bit dry, this material. But without understanding it, we can't progress. So, from Tifereth, which was Sephiroth number 6, we progress to Geborah, which is strength and courage. And this is represented on the microcosmic level by the Hierophant, and the macrocosmic level, i.e. the global stage, by the Devil card, right? Then we progress to Hesod, which represents mercy. This is Sephiroth number 4, which expresses kindness, love, and mercy. And this is shown through the Temperance card. Okay, and also on a microcosmic level by the Emperor card. Okay, progressing from that, one goes to Binah, understanding, Sephiroth number 3, and this is represented on a microscopic level by the Empress card, and on a macroscopic level by the Death card. Okay. Once we go from Binah, understanding, number 3, Sephirot number 3, to Hokmah, which is wisdom, Sephirot number 2, this is represented in the tarot by the High Priestess card in the microscopic and the hanged man in the macroscopic. From that we go up to Kether, which is the crown, which is symbolized in the tarot again by the Magician card in the microscopic and the Justice card in the macroscopic. Okay? Now, the 3 pillars as they are known in Kabbalistic tradition, because each branch, if you will, that stems from Yesod, the foundation, is a pillar. Okay? And the pillar on the left-hand side is known as the pillar of severity. Okay? And this incorporates Hod, Geborah, and Binah. So, beauty, strength and courage, and understanding. Okay? This is the pillar of severity, as they call it. Right? The pillar of mercy on the other side, on the right-hand side, is Netzach, Hesod, and Hokmah. So, victory, endurance, leadership, kindness, love, and mercy, and wisdom. Right? This is the pillar of mercy. And when these 2 extremes, in some regards, combine with reality, they constitute what is called the pillar of mildness. Okay? And this is the combination of both of these. So if you like, you can think about it in the Hegelian sense of having a thesis and an antithesis, and then the pillar of mildness incorporates that into a synthesis. And at the top of that pillar of mildness is unity consciousness, Kether, Sephirot number 1, unity, right? A unified persona. So, if you will, this is the ultimate end of the psychological individuation process. So, we journey through from the physical world to the mental plane, as I mentioned, to the emotional plane, and then, of course, to the plane of will, or the archetypal world beyond that, where Kether is. And that is demonstrably a psychological process on the microscopic level. Because, as Carl Jung noted, archetypes are highly developed elements of the collective unconscious, which manifest as symbols, images, and motifs. This is part of the reason why the people that are familiar with the occult will incorporate these very symbols, images, and motifs that are common to the collective unconscious in order to be able to put across their ideas, opinions, thoughts on certain matters. Okay? And of course, as we can gauge from the Economist's cover, those who own the Economist, those who publish the magazine, they are very, very familiar with these concepts. How do we know that? Well, because on the 2017 cover, as I mentioned, you had the Tower card, the Judgment card, the World card, the Hermit card, the Death card, the Magician card, the Wheel of Fortune, and the Star card. Now, I'm going to get into what each of these means given this context of the Kabbalistic traditions, okay? So we are going to do that. This will bring clarity to the meaning of it all. No one else has done this as far as I know, and the reason for that is because they are probably not as familiar as I am myself with these philosophies, these symbols, these images, just because I have had access to those works. In fact, I own them, right? MacGregor Mather's copy of the Golden Dawn's practices regarding the Tarot and the Kabbalah, and also, of course, his definitive works with regards to the Kabbalistic traditions. I also happen to own Eliphas Levi's works as well, not because there is anything there that I find believable in some sort of theological sense, or theosophical sense even, but because they do show the path with regards to how those symbols, images and motifs, archetypes, are used by those with that knowledge. If you want to tackle anything in life, you have to be familiar with the underpinning philosophies and the concepts, right? And this applies to virtually any form of thought, whether it be religion or whether it be things like this, the realm of the occult, if you will, as well, right? So let's go into what the Economist's cover was representing with all of this. So the Tower card, because it links to Tifereth, which is the 6th Sephirot, this on the image itself you see communism on one side with the communist flag, and the Christian symbol, the cross, on the other side of a tower, right? This represents ideologies falling down. Okay, it represents the ideologies, both of these ideologies crumbling, right? And it's as simple as that. This is the reality, okay, because Tifereth represents reality. Communism and Christianity are falling as ideas, especially in the West, which is exactly what is symbolized in the further cards. Now, in the Judgment card which follows, Donald Trump is sitting upon the American flag and reigning over the US, okay, which is obviously fairly straightforward. But the reason why that is such a heavy-hitting image is because it is linked to Malkuth, or the Sephirot number 10, which represents kingdom, okay? Kingdom, as in the king who has dominion over a certain region, okay? So what they were espousing there was their viewpoint that Donald Trump is reigning over the kingdom, okay? You also see in his hand the scepter and the he's holding something else in that hand. It's hard to make out exactly what it is, but it seems to incorporate the symbology that is also on the Hierophant card, or the Emperor card. So that itself, again, demonstrates that they view Trump as having a symbological stronghold over the US. Okay, this is not objectively true, I must stress, but this is their worldview. Okay, the World card on the cover of The Economist can be linked to Da'ath, which is the hidden knowledge. Okay, knowledge of all that is hidden. And this can be seen on the card, on the cover, as representing knowledge of the hidden being shared between the seats of temporal power. If you look at the positions of the various buildings, the pyramid and the other buildings, which also incorporate ancient symbologies, the Hermetic traditions and whatnot, that's where you find that knowledge being shared, whether it's in book form, which is represented in that image, as well as more modern forms as well. So it's a very, very intricate image, which is representing that the knowledge of the hidden is now visible. Okay, the occult has been de-occulted, if you will. It is being demystified by a lot of people. And then we see the Hermit card, which is linked to Sephiroth number 8, which is Hod, which represents glory and splendor and beauty, right? A tidal wave of public rebellion is depicted on the card, right? Sweeping the land as people begin their journey through introspection and awakening, because the Hermit card itself, of course, represents that, right? But its particular position also represents that people are beginning to see ugliness and beauty for what they are in the world. Now, following this, you start to see this ominous chain of cards, which is the Death card, which can be linked to Sephiroth number 3, Binah, understanding. Okay? And in this context, what it represents is the passing of the old world order. Okay? In the background, you've got this dark sun rising, which is symbologically linked to the black sun. Okay? And we'll get into the meaning behind that a little bit as well. But it's representing the passing of the old world order, the rise of the black sun, desolation, and a return of materialism. You then have the Magician card, and the Magician card corresponds to Sephiroth number 1, which is Kether, which is unity consciousness, unified order. Okay, but the magician in the image is wearing a virtual reality headset. So virtual reality is beginning to replace real living. People are living inside bubbles of illusion and hallucination. Okay, a singular collectivized mastermind. Okay, this is what this represents. They are going to attempt, okay, and I'm citing this because of what they are saying, not because this is my point of view. They are saying in that cover of The Economist that they are going to do this, a singular collectivized mastermind, one mind, an overmind if you like, okay, that will link human beings to a false reality. The Wheel of Fortune, which follows on from that, represents, of course, Malkuth, which is Sephiroth number 10, which again corresponds to kingdom. Okay, so the dominion of a new king. This new kingdom, this cosmic change in global alliances, is not going to be for the better. Okay, this is the key point here. They will seek to undo any progress that human beings are looking to make in their thinking, in their clarity, in their consciousness, in their emotions, all of these various aspects of self. And that's plain to see from the symbology there as well. The next card that they have on that cover is the Star card. Now, the Star card corresponds to Netzach, Sephiroth number 7, which is representative of victory, okay, and also of leadership and endurance of the old powers in a new paradigm. So humanity is led astray by its idealism. This is something that the card itself also represents. So this is absolutely on point, to the point. Okay, that is the bulk total of what they are saying with that cover. Okay, so if you've had an interest in that cover and you've wanted to understand the meaning behind it, I have just explained it to you fully, completely, citing the sources for these conclusions. Right now, what I am also going to do from beyond this point is to go into a little bit more detail with regards to certain elements that are mentioned through that, such as the black sun. Okay, now a lot of people won't understand that, right? The black sun is representative of the darker Kabbalistic traditions. Okay? Now, the tree of life that we were talking about looks at the lighter aspect, the light. We talked about the light, okay, which is highly important to Kabbalists, the Kabbalah itself, right? But the Kabbalah has a dark aspect to it as well, beneath the 10th Sephirot of Malkuth. So beneath our kingdom, the physical world, the earth, it looks at something called the inverse fifth dimension. Okay, this is metaphorical. This is not to be taken as literally true, right? Just like all the other things inside the Kabbalah are metaphors. Because it was an exoteric, hermetic philosophy, right? Within that inverse fifth dimension is what they call the Qlipothic dimension, right? I.e. Qlipothic forms of thought. Okay? What does that mean? Let me expound on that a little bit so that you don't get led astray by people who perhaps are not familiar with these concepts properly. Now, Qlipothic thought forms. The word Qlipoth itself means shells or husks. Okay? Now, when one does not go through the process of self-illumination or self-understanding or philosophical and psychological individuation so that one comes to a certain unified consciousness within yourself, not externally. The last thing you need is unified consciousness externally. Okay? The reason that there are reasons for that, and even the Kabbalah, the light side of the Kabbalah, explains this. Okay? But within yourself, you need to be unified and not in a state of duality, which we'll talk about later as well. Okay? Most people today, as a result of dark occultic symbols, thoughts, ideas, philosophies, have become empty shells or husks. Okay? Because they've given into a unified, singular lack of consciousness, I could call it. Okay, collectivism. That's what we're really talking about. Collectivism, right? Collectivism is very, very dangerous because at the center of it is duality. Bizarrely, believe it or not. Now, and the reason for that is because you cannot hold two simultaneous thoughts in your head which are contradictory. It contravenes the Aristotle's law of logic, right? Principles of logic. So, if you disagree with the collective and you're trying to hold that thought in your mind whilst being part of the collective, it will drive you insane. Okay? So this is why dualistic nature is dangerous. And also if one is dualistic inside oneself, that can be highly destructive as well. Okay? But in terms of the Qlipoths, they have not gone through the process of ascending within the Kabbalistic traditions, the Kabbalistic tree of life. They haven't ascended through these processes where you need to combine these various aspects of self, right? They haven't done that. In short, they haven't done the psychological work on themselves that's necessary for balance. These are the things I spoke about in the previous video slightly, okay? You need balance in this life. You need love, emotion, care, true care, but you also need a certain amount of, as I stated in the pillar of severity, logic, rationality, understanding, all these various facets of the mind, right? You need those as well. Anyone who's imbalanced in these regards ends up in the Qlipothic realm where there's a descent in the tree of life, okay? So what do we mean by this descent? Well, in this inverse descent of the individual, you have a whole different tree of death, as they call it, soul death, okay? or psychological death, death of the psyche, which starts at Thamiel, which represents duality, okay, and then descends downwards. You don't ascend necessarily up the tree of death, okay? You descend downwards in that. So you go from Thaniel, duality, to Chaigidel, which is confusion and emptiness, okay? Confusion, emptiness then leads to concealment of true knowledge, concealment of understanding, which is Sephirot number 3 inside the tree of death, which is represented by Satariel, okay? From that, Da'ath, then that which is hidden, right, represents ignorance, okay? Being ignorant of the known knowns and the unknown unknowns, if you like, right? You just become ignorant of everything. And you descend downwards to Gamchikoth, which is Sephirot number 4 on the tree of death, which represents being a devourer, being wasteful, okay? The progression then goes to Golachab, which represents destruction, enforced will, domination, injustice, and we could see this obviously within many people today. This then descends to Tagarion, which is grief, tears, ugliness, death, and generally revolting themes, if you will, in the imagery. You then descend to Harab Serapel, which is representative of rejection of one's own self and one's own kind. Okay, basically you end up hating humanity. This is what happens. One becomes nihilistic in nature as a result. This then progresses to Sephirot number 8 on the tree of death, which is Samiel, the desolation of God, as they called it in the original Hebrew, which represents failure, feeling as if you've fallen from your higher self, the sacrifice of the inner child, if you will. Okay, it's pretty horrific stuff from a psychological standpoint. You then descend to Gamaliel, which means the pollution of all that is holy. Okay, the pollution of God, as they called it in the Hebrew. I mean, well, they didn't call it that in the Hebrew, but that would be the interpretation, of course, in our English, as it were. From that, one descends to Nehemoth, representing fear, nightmares, and general whispers that disturb the mind. Okay, voices in your head, so to speak, that are they could be of a schizophrenic nature, of course, but more likely they are the voices of self-doubt and self-hatred and anger and all these other things that we see, and so on. So, why am I explaining all of that? Because in place of the Sephirot Tifereth, which represented reality, okay, you have Sephirot number 6 there, Tagarion, which represents grief and tears and ugliness and death as your reality, okay? And that is represented by the sun, the black sun. Not the sun, but the black sun, okay? Which is the imagery we saw on the Economist's cover. So again, I'm sorry if this is dry material and this is rather boring to some extent, or probably not of interest to some of you, or maybe most of you, right? But it's necessary to know this to understand the archetypical images that are being employed within the context of any publication, really, that is using those things. So each of these aspects has some bearing on the human spirit, the human individual. Okay? Now, we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, right? I'll try and cover as much ground in this video as I can with regards to these elements. So let's talk about the pentagram, okay? Now, the pentagram is not depicted in the cover of The Economist, but I want to try and explain something to a few of you, which you may not be fully cognizant of. So the pentagram represents, the 5 points of the pentagram represent different elements: air, water, earth, and fire. Okay, now I don't mean that in the sense of the elements themselves, nor did the original Kabbalists who came up with that particular image of the pentagram. Okay, as we discussed in the Kabbalistic tree of life, the physical realm is represented by the symbol for the earth. Okay, and the earth is symbolized by the lower left point on the pentagram. Okay, the physical realm: reason, judgment, karmic law, natural law, karmic consequence. Okay, on the opposite side of that is the archetypal image of fire, which interestingly enough represents the archetypal realm. Okay, the plane of willpower, wisdom, understanding, collective unconscious combined with the conscious mind, an individuated man, an individuated woman. Okay, the power and the strength of one's own willpower, right? Following on from that, on the top right, the point on the top right of the pentagram represents water, and water is representative of the emotional plane on the tree of life, representing kindness, love, mercy, courage, strength, all of these various aspects of self, the emotions, right? On the top left, you've got the symbolism representing air, okay, the mental plane. This is symbolic of endurance, leadership, idealism, victory, beauty, and glory. And at the very top of the pentagram, you have the spirit, the human spirit, i.e. unity consciousness, i.e. Kether, okay? The very top Sephirot on the tree of life. Unity consciousness, harmony, and balance, okay? Now, why are we talking about the pentagram? And why did I just go through that? Because an upside down pentagram, which is used by certain satanic groups, okay, represents the complete opposite of all of this. It's natural balance being turned on its head, okay? It represents ignorance, refusal to acknowledge objective truths, confusion, inner chaos, enslavement, bondage, external chaos, and evil, okay? Why does it represent all of those things? Because the top point, if you remember, from what I've just said, the top point of the pentagram is representative of the human spirit, okay? And so, what you have is the material realm reigning over the human spirit. So, earth, fire, water, air, these are all greater than the spirit. Okay, they have more power in your worldview, in your perception, right? So, basically, you end up with all of the material aspects, the physical, the will, the emotional, the mental plane, all of these are considered to be more powerful, okay? And what ends up happening as a result, and you'll see that you have the 2 points now at the top when it's inverted. When the pentagram's inverted, you've got 2 points, okay? And that is because it represents that state of duality we were talking about. Imbalance, materialism over mercy, irrationality, total control over the will of lesser beings, okay? So people who don't have any philosophical, psychological, scientific, or occult knowledge are deemed to be lesser beings by those who implement that particular symbol, the upside down pentagram, okay? And that is the reason why the Satanists use it, because they are eugenicists, They believe in the concept of eugenics. I can read you those passages again straight out of Peter Gilmore's book, which I own. They also are great believers in dominance over the lesser individuals. Okay, so this is the symbology behind many of the occult groups and the occult philosophies that are out there. And so by becoming familiar with these things, we can begin to understand what they are seeing in their symbology, what they are seeing in their publications, the archetypal images that they are employing. Okay? And there are many of these kinds of images around. And this is also, this manifests in media as well. Okay, all realms of media, not just published media, but films and television and things like this as well. I mean, they are used in ways that most people can't imagine, and it's not because there's anything. And this is a misconception I want to unburden you of. Okay, these symbols aren't used because they have some strange, supernatural, magical, mystical powers. Okay, the symbols alone don't have any power over you, right? But they are used because they represent the philosophies and the thinking of the people behind them. And you can see a lot of this symbolism that's incorporated into a lot of the mediums. And some of it is actually astrological and planetary. Okay, so for example, with Sephiroth number 3, which is Binah, understanding, you've got Saturn representing that. That's why you find a lot of Saturn symbolism in things that necessitate the image of understanding. Okay, you've got Neptune oftentimes symbolizing Kether, which is unity. Okay, so if they want to project the concept of unity, they will employ something symbolic of Neptune. If they want to get across the idea of wisdom, you'll find them using the same images as they would for Uranus, the planet Uranus. It's difficult to say that without slipping up, really. But with Gibora, for example, that's oftentimes represented, i.e. strength and courage, represented by the planet Mars, or the symbol for Mars. Okay? Hesod is represented, i.e. mercy, is represented by Jupiter, okay, or oftentimes also interchangeably with Ishtar, okay, and Ishtar, of course, was often depicted with owls and so forth as well. So there's a lot of symbolism in these things. Sephiroth number 6, which is Tifereth, is represented by the golden sun, okay. You've got Hod, represented by Mercury. You've got Netzach, which is Sephiroth number 7, represented by Venus. And of course you've got Yesod, represented by the moon. And then Malkuth, which is the physical realm, represented by the same alchemical symbols as for Earth, because it represents the physical plane, the physical Earth. So don't be surprised if you find many of these symbols incorporated into the mediums that you see. You will now have a key to interpreting them. Okay, this is pretty basic stuff, but it's basically cryptology, if you like. It's cryptography. Okay, everything's encoded via symbolisms through Hermetic traditions, and this is one of the reasons why people find it so hard to understand many of the things that are thrown at them in images and symbols, because they don't know. They're trying to use their intuitive understanding of things, but because they haven't studied the Hermetic traditions, they are ignorant of exactly what is being said via images. So I'll leave it there for this video, except to say one small thing, which is that don't be put off by people who tell you not to study the occult, okay? And the reason I'm going to tell you that is because the very people that are telling you that are the same people that want you to remain ignorant of all the things that are happening in the world, okay? And all these machinations of powerful people in powerful positions come to light when you begin to understand what they are saying, because they can't help but tell you exactly what they want to do, or how they want to do it, or what their thoughts and feelings are on things, right? It's a sense of overconfidence, really, okay? And they tend to put that into everything they do, okay? So I hope that's been informative in some sense. It's not a topic or subject that I was really looking to cover because of the depth of the material, right? It is very, very difficult to put it all together and put it in a form that's coherent and understandable to most people. Just because all of these things that I've just told you about are found in so many different texts. They're spread out all over. And so putting it all together takes time. But I'm glad I did that, and I hope that you guys get something out of this, and that you continue to explore these concepts. Okay? But that's been my video for demystifying the occult, and I will talk to you again in perhaps the next video. Take good care.